like a breeze, country road, sing.
For 25 years, John Denver was RCA's golden boy. Then they dropped him, like he meant nothing. His ex-wives had already exposed his violent temper and chainsaw rampages. Even his drinking had cost him his pilot's license. By 1997, he couldn't legally fly anymore, but he kept going up anyway. The experimental plane that killed him had a fatal flaw. When investigators finally pieced it together, they found something darker. The crash was preventable. The warning signs were everywhere, but nobody listened. What really happened that day will shock you. John Denver was born as Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. on December 31st, 1943. He was born in Roswell, New Mexico, into a family that loved flying. His father, Captain Henry Dutch Deutschendorf Sr., was a famous Air Force pilot who set 3 speed records in the B-58 Hustler bomber. Dutch was a hero in the military world and was even inducted into the Air Force Hall of Fame. But for young John, life wasn't easy. Being a military kid meant moving all the time. He lived in Arizona, Alabama, and Texas, never staying long enough to make real friends. Every time he began to feel settled, it was time to pack up and go again. This left him feeling lonely and like he didn't belong anywhere. That sense of not having a true home stayed with him forever. When John was 11 years old and living in Tucson, Arizona, his grandmother gave him a very special gift. It was an old Gibson guitar built in 1910, making it more than 40 years old. For a boy who felt uprooted most of his life, that guitar became something constant and real. Music gave him a way to say things he couldn't put into words. The sound of its strings comforted him. He also began singing with the Tucson, Arizona Boys Chorus, where he learned to harmonize and perform on stage. Being part of this famous group gave him a sense of belonging that school never could. By high school, he was already playing folk songs at small gigs. Music was becoming more than a hobby. It was his way of making sense of his life. His father was a strict man, and their relationship was often tense. Dutch expected his son to excel in everything. John was more gentle and dreamed of writing songs. But they did share one big passion: flying. When John became a pilot himself, they finally grew closer. Flying together was a way for them to bond, though it was also risky. That risk would haunt John later in life, especially after his own fatal plane crash in 1997. Even so, that connection stayed with him, making its way into his songs about freedom and the endless skies. After high school, John enrolled at Texas Tech University to study architecture. But his heart wasn't in drawing blueprints. Deep down, he wanted to make music, so he left school and moved to Los Angeles. Around this time, he decided to take a new last name. He picked Denver after Colorado's capital, because the state's mountains and rivers inspired him. It felt like a fresh start. In 1965, he got a huge break. Out of 250 singers who auditioned, he was picked to be the lead singer for the Chad Mitchell Trio. This was his first big chance in the music world. It put him in front of new audiences across the country and gave him the experience he needed to grow. He spent 2 years with the group and recorded 3 albums. On stage, he learned to sing with confidence. Off stage, he practiced writing his own songs. Touring was hard, but John soaked it all in. Slowly, he was finding his voice. One of the most famous songs he wrote during this time was "Leaving on a Jet Plane." Peter, Paul, and Mary recorded it in 1967, and by 1969, it hit #1 on the Billboard charts. Suddenly, everyone was singing his words. Even though he wasn't yet a big solo star, this success showed that his songwriting mattered. When the Mitchell Trio ended, John didn't look back. He was already climbing the pop charts on his own. By the early 1970s, he was scoring hits one after another. That smooth jump from group singer to solo star was rare, but John made it look easy. John Denver's career took off in 1971 with the release of his breakthrough album, Poems, Prayers, and Promises. The standout track, Take Me Home, Country Roads almost never became the anthem we all know. Early copies had sound problems, and for a moment, it looked like the song might fail. But Denver's new manager, Jerry Weintraub, had other plans. He pushed the song hard on radio stations, starting in Denver, Colorado. Released on April 12, 1971, it took a few months to catch on. By August 28th, it had climbed to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. It sold more than 1 million copies and went gold that same month. Over the years, it kept going strong. By 2017, it had sold more than 1.5 million digital copies in the U.S. Its influence even reached the state of West Virginia, which adopted it as an official state anthem in 2014. In 1972, Denver followed up with Rocky Mountain High. Released in September that year, it was his 6th album and his first to reach the U.S. top 10. It peaked at number 4 on the Billboard 200. The title song became one of Denver's most famous tracks, reaching the Billboard Hot 100 top 10 in 1973. It was ranked number 29 on the year-end chart and is still loved by fans of the outdoors. The cover was shot at Slaughterhouse Falls in Aspen, Colorado, making it even more personal. Decades later, in 2007, Rocky Mountain High was adopted as one of Colorado's 2 official state songs. The years 1974 and 1975 were John Denver's most successful. In just 18 months, he scored 4 number 1 hits on the Billboard Hot 100. Sunshine on My Shoulders hit number 1 in March 1974, followed by Annie's Song in July 1974. Thank God I'm a Country Boy topped the charts in May 1975, and I'm Sorry followed in September 1975. These hits showed every side of his talent. Some were gentle and hopeful, like Sunshine on My Shoulders. Others, like Thank God I'm a Country Boy, were full of energy. Annie's Song, written in just 10 minutes for his wife, became a classic wedding song. Denver was everywhere at this point, on radio, on television, and in millions of living rooms. During this golden period, Denver also released 3 albums that all went to number 1. John Denver's Greatest Hits in 1973 was so successful, it became RCA Records' best-selling album ever, even outselling Elvis Presley. Back Home Again followed in 1974 and went triple platinum in the U.S. Windsong came out in 1975 and went double platinum. Together, these 3 albums confirmed that Denver was a true superstar. By the end of his career, Denver had created around 300 songs. He wrote about 200 of them himself. In all, he earned 12 gold and 4 platinum albums. Worldwide sales topped 33 million units. That made him one of the most successful singer-songwriters of the 1970s. John Denver's jump into Hollywood was as surprising as it was successful. In 1977, he starred alongside comedy legend George Burns in the hit movie Oh God. Denver had never acted before, yet his easygoing charm and sincerity won over audiences. Directed by Carl Reiner and based on a novel by Avery Corman, the film told the story of a regular supermarket manager chosen by God to spread a divine message. Denver's performance felt natural and real, making it easy to believe his character. The film became a huge success, earning over $51 million in the U.S., and even receiving an Oscar nomination for its screenplay. Even though he never appeared in the sequels, this first role showed that Denver could do more than sing and cemented him as a rare musician who moved into acting without missing a beat. Denver also created a style that people loved. Throughout the 1970s, his long blonde hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and embroidered Western shirts became his trademark. These shirts were designed by Anna Zapp, who Denver met at an art fair in Aspen. Her colorful, handmade designs matched his gentle, down-to-earth image. Other stars like Willie Nelson and Bonnie Raitt would later wear her shirts too. Denver's look was warm, welcoming, and easy to recognize. It felt very different from the louder styles of other performers and came to stand for the simple, heartfelt spirit of folk and country music at the time. He also managed to win over audiences outside the US, even when some critics weren't sure he could. His manager, Jerry Weintraub, thought it was important for Denver to connect directly with international fans. So, despite some doubts, Weintraub set up a series of television specials for British viewers. Weintraub explained that the critics weren't going to make Denver a star, so they'd go straight to the people. The plan worked perfectly. Denver's warm, friendly style and clear voice charmed British audiences and created a loyal fan base across Europe. The specials showed that television was a powerful way to introduce new artists overseas and helped make Denver a global name. Denver's ties to Colorado ran deep, too. After moving to Aspen, he embraced the state's landscape and lifestyle. In 1974, Colorado honored him as its poet laureate. 2 years earlier, he had released Rocky Mountain High, a song that captured the feeling of standing by a blue mountain lake and enjoying the quiet forest. The song became an unofficial anthem for Colorado and was finally named one of its 2 official state songs in 2007. Denver's connection to the region felt real to people. Even in West Virginia, lawmakers adopted his song Take Me Home, Country Roads as one of their state songs in 2014, showing how his music painted vivid pictures of American places. Denver was also a television star throughout the 1970s and 1980s. His 1975 special, An Evening with John Denver, even won a Primetime Emmy Award. This was a big honor and put him alongside some of the most respected performers of the time. Denver appeared in many other TV specials too, singing his hits, telling stories, and performing with friends. These shows brought his music into living rooms all across America and around the world. Every appearance felt personal and heartfelt, which made him one of the most beloved entertainers of his era. John Denver was more than a singer. In 1985, he stood before the U.S. Senate. Parents had been pushing for warning labels on albums they thought were too explicit. Even though Denver was known for gentle songs, he spoke up. He told them how his own song, Rocky Mountain High, had once been censored because someone thought it was about drugs. That wasn't true. Denver stayed calm and firm as he defended free expression. Many thought someone like him would support the warning labels, but he didn't. That moment changed the debate forever. The music world still feels the impact today. That same year, Denver became the first American artist to tour the Soviet Union in over 10 years. The Cold War was tense. Tensions between the two countries ran high. Denver decided to do something different. He played 11 concerts across the USSR. The tour was more than entertainment. It was a bridge between cultures. People in Moscow, Leningrad, and Tallinn embraced him. Even those who didn't know his language understood his message of peace. Denver sang about their struggles and his own hopes. It inspired him to write a new song, Let Us Begin, about choosing peace over war. Recordings from this tour became his famous live album, Live in the USSR. In 1987, Denver went back to the Soviet Union after the Chernobyl disaster. The nuclear accident had forced 92,000 people to leave their homes. Thousands were at risk of illness. Denver sang at a benefit concert in Moscow. The show raised around $140,000 from ticket sales alone. Even more came in through recordings. That night was not about politics. It was about compassion and humanity. Soviet audiences felt seen. Denver showed that one person with a guitar could do something powerful. In 1992, Denver took his music to China. After years of isolation, the Chinese people were curious about him. Songs like Country Roads were already being sung in parks and schools. The Chinese government invited him to tour multiple cities. They even agreed to broadcast one of his concerts to more than 2 billion people. Some suggested holding the show at places like the Forbidden City or the Temple of Heaven. Chinese youth welcomed him like a hero. Leaders like Deng Xiaoping had noticed Denver years earlier when he visited Washington, D.C. That visit left a deep impression. Denver's tour made him one of the most loved Western musicians in China at the time. Later in his career, Denver focused more on helping others. In the 1990s, he released an album of his greatest hits called Homegrown. Every penny went to support people who were homeless. Around this time, he also co-founded the World Hunger Project. That group earned him the Presidential World Without Hunger Award. Denver was involved in environmental causes too. He created the WinStar Foundation and launched Plant It 2000 to replant forests. His charity work became as much a part of him as his music. Yet Denver's personal life was full of pain. His marriage to Annie Martell began as a dream. They adopted 2 children together. Denver even wrote Annie's song for her in just 10 minutes. But as his fame grew, so did their troubles. Annie often felt lost in his shadow. By the early 1980s, they decided to divorce. What followed was chaos. Denver, normally so gentle in public, acted out in private. Reports said he became angry and unpredictable. Their divorce in 1982 was bitter and sad. One day, after Annie cut down some of his favorite oak trees at their Aspen home, Denver lost control. He showed up with a chainsaw. Instead of yelling, he cut their furniture in pieces. He even sliced their bed in 2. It was a dark symbol of a marriage that had fallen apart. Friends and witnesses could hardly believe this was the same gentle singer they knew. Annie had been the one to file for divorce back in 1982. The papers revealed a pattern of abuse that shattered Denver's clean image. Friends backed up her story. Even his former manager spoke of his dark temper. Though Annie kept a low profile after their divorce, the damage was done. Many who had admired Denver began to see him in a different light. John Denver first met Australian singer and actress Cassandra Delaney in 1985 at Sydney's Siebel Townhouse. She was performing in the hotel bar, and he was instantly drawn to her. Their romance moved fast. By August 1988, they had an extravagant wedding on a mountain above Aspen. The scene was beautiful, surrounded by close friends and family. To many, it looked like a fairy tale. But from the beginning, there were cracks. Cassandra later admitted the pressures of being with a famous man were huge. John was 20 years older. Fame followed him everywhere, and his moods could swing wildly. What looked perfect to the world was already tense behind closed doors. In May 1989, their daughter Jessie was born. John had always thought he couldn't have kids because of a childhood illness. The pregnancy was a surprise and a miracle. John had told people for years that he was sterile, so Jessie's birth created rumors. Some wondered if they had used IVF. John became more possessive after Jessie was born. Cassandra felt him grow jealous and distant. The fragile balance between them began to collapse. By 1996, Cassandra spoke to Australian Women's Weekly and painted a dark picture. She said John had no real friends. Staff were scared of him. Secretaries would cry and quit. What most people saw as his gentle image was just an act. Off stage, he was often angry, unpredictable, and harsh with the people closest to him. She revealed years of emotional torment. John drank heavily, lashed out at her, and tried to control every part of her life. She stayed silent for a long time, hoping to change him, but nothing worked. The pressure was too much. In 1991, they separated, and their divorce was final by 1993. The legal fight was brutal. John sued Cassandra for $3.3 million and accused her of making a fool of him. Cassandra fought for custody of Jessie. John wrote in his autobiography that she had humiliated him across the valley. The war left them both hurt and angry. After that, John was never quite the same. In 1994, he released his autobiography, Take Me Home. It shattered his clean image. He admitted to long struggles with cannabis, LSD, and cocaine. These admissions shocked his fans. They had always seen him as a gentle, nature-loving singer. Now they learned about the darker sides of his life. He also wrote about cheating on his wives. Even his first marriage to Annie Martell, which had inspired Annie's song, had been full of affairs. He told readers he had been more physical than he should have been. and spoke about violent outbursts that destroyed his second marriage too. One story stood out, him using a chainsaw to cut their bed in half. John Denver was once one of America's most loved singer-songwriters. Throughout the 1970s, he topped the charts and won millions of fans with his gentle voice, heartfelt lyrics, and acoustic sound. RCA Records stood by him for 25 albums, including 13 gold and 8 platinum records, and his greatest hits album was RCA's best-selling LP ever. But by the mid-1980s, things began to change. The new sound of the 1980s was all slick synths and drum machines. MTV-driven pop was everywhere, and his folk country style felt out of place. In 1986, after RCA was sold to General Electric, the company decided to cut costs and focus on more modern acts. Despite his history with RCA and all his past success, they dropped him. Denver was stunned. He had just completed his last album for them, One World, and thought a new contract was a sure thing. Instead, RCA decided they could make more money elsewhere. He said they had taken him for granted, especially after years of him bringing them so much profit. With nowhere else to go, he was forced to put his next albums out on his own Windstar label. It was a harsh reminder that even a superstar can be left behind when styles and priorities change. At the same time, Denver was battling other troubles. Flying had become one of his great passions. Over the years, he logged more than 2,700 hours in the air and earned ratings for single and multi-engine planes, gliders, and even Learjets, but his personal struggles began to catch up with him. In the 1990s, Denver was arrested for driving under the influence, not once, but twice. The FAA, which requires pilots to have a valid medical certificate as proof they're fit to fly, took notice. After his second DUI arrest, they denied his medical certificate. Without it, his pilot's license was useless. Getting it back would have required him to show that he no longer had a drinking problem, but he never completed that process. Flying had once been his greatest joy, but now even that was taken from him. More troubling was how he handled the FAA's orders. When they sent him certified letters demanding that he surrender his medical certificate, he simply ignored them or sent them back unopened. Months passed like this, with Denver flying even though he was no longer medically certified. By refusing to accept the letters, he stayed in a legal loophole. The FAA couldn't complete the revocation process until he accepted their notice, so technically, he could keep flying. But this was not because he was fit. It was because of a gap in the system that relied on his cooperation. That loophole finally closed in March 1997. Denver signed for one of the FAA's certified letters, which meant they could officially ground him. From that moment on, every flight was illegal. Getting his status back would mean proving his sobriety and completing all the requirements he had ignored for years. Denver chose not to do that. Yet none of this kept him away from the skies. On October 12, 1997, he took his recently purchased Long Easy experimental aircraft out for practice takeoffs and landings near Monterey, California. It was a small plane with serious modifications. Denver had owned it for one day and had spent only about 30 minutes with a Czech pilot before going up on his own. The plane was customized so much that it was hard to fly. The fuel selector valve, for example, was moved 45 inches back, forcing him to twist in his seat and reach behind his left shoulder. It was stiff and hard to turn. It even needed pliers to move properly. Worse, the fuel gauges were behind him too, so he had no way to read them without twisting around and using a handheld mirror. Even then, the gauges were unclear, telling him only vague, non-linear estimates of what was left in the tank. A reading of 1/4 full meant there was actually less than 5 gallons left in the 26-gallon tank. That morning, at Monterey Peninsula Airport, Denver ran the left tank dry while practicing takeoffs and landings. Witnesses heard the engine sputter, then go quiet as the fuel ran out. Denver twisted around to switch to the right tank. To do that, he had to reach blindly behind him and use pliers to turn the selector. In the process, he accidentally pushed the right rudder pedal. The long EZ nosed sharply down, and within seconds it plunged into the Pacific Ocean. Denver was killed instantly. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board later determined that Denver had too little fuel to begin with, about 3 gallons in one tank and 6 in the other, and that his unfamiliarity with the plane was a major cause. They also cited the unsafe design modifications that made it almost impossible to switch fuel in flight. Even though he was an experienced pilot, he hadn't properly prepared for the demands of this plane. The NTSB report was clear. This crash could have been avoided if Denver had refueled, trained more thoroughly, or had a fuel system that was easier to manage. The accident would never have happened. His final flight became a heartbreaking lesson in how overlooked details and poor decisions can add up to a tragic end.